They simply called her the janitor. They laughed when she read during her shift, then froze as she ascended the graduation stage as valedictorian. She exposed everything everyone at Larchmont Hills Academy knew about Olivia Cranston and Camille Strathmore. You didn't even have to ask. They were the daughters of people who flew private, who dined where menus had no prices. When they entered a room, people either stood or looked down, out of habit, fear, or envy. They weren't evil, not exactly. But they'd learned young they didn't need to be kind. Charm was optional. Respect was only given to those who could offer something in return. And for someone like Janice Albany, the quiet black woman with soft eyes and calloused hands, there was nothing to be gained. Janice had worked at the school for almost 2 years. Every weekday she arrived before dawn and left long after the last SUV departed the gated parking lot. She cleaned floors, polished trophies in the main hall, and ensured the restrooms didn't smell like privilege. She rarely spoke unless spoken to, and when she did, her voice was as calm as a still pond. But one day Camille noticed something. During lunch break she'd left her phone in the chemistry lab. Rushing back, she glimpsed Janice in an empty classroom, not cleaning, but flipping through a thick biology textbook, her lips moving as if reciting something. Camille leaned against the doorframe, a smirk playing on her lips. "Didn't peg you for a science girl," she said. Janice looked up. "Just refreshing some old knowledge." Camille tilted her head. "You're going to teach now too?" Janice smiled faintly. "Not exactly. It started small." Side comments, laughter as Janice walked by. Camille told Olivia and the two turned it into a game. "Oh look," Olivia whispered one morning as Janice wheeled her cart past their lunch table. "Einstein with a mop." Camille chuckled. "Probably writing her thesis on floor wax." They laughed a little too loudly. Other students heard. Some joined in, others just looked away. No one stopped them. Janice kept her head down as always. But what students missed was the way her eyes lingered on the school crest engraved on the wall, her gaze not bitter but calculating. They didn't notice how she listened more than she spoke, or how a notebook in her cart's side pocket was half filled with observations. Only one person treated her with warmth. Mr. Del Toro, a literature teacher from Fresno with a soft spot for underdogs. He once found Janice straightening copies of To Kill a Mockingbird on a cart outside his classroom. "You know," he said, "most people just stack them and move on." Janice gave a half shrug. "That book deserves better than crooked edges." He grinned. "I say that all the time." He paused. "You've read it?" Janice looked at him. "Twice. First time in high school. Second time when I was old enough to understand what it really meant." He never asked more than that, but from then on he'd leave a book for her on the bench outside the staff room every other Friday. No note, no questions. Still the girls didn't stop. One afternoon Olivia waited until Janice passed, then muttered, "I bet she sleeps in the janitor's closet. Probably dreams in Clorox." It wasn't just rude, it was cruel. But Janice kept walking. That bothered Olivia more than anything. She expected shame or anger or at least a flinch. But Janice's silence felt like a mirror they couldn't avoid, and that made her dangerous. The school's lights dimmed around 8 p.m. most nights, but a few always stayed on, casting long shadows across the marble corridors. That's when Janice came alive in a different way. With classrooms quiet and the noise of teenage self-importance gone, she'd roll her cart into the supply closet, change into a fresh shirt, and carry her notebook to room 114. Room 114 wasn't assigned to any particular class anymore. It had a flickering light and one desk leg shorter than the rest. Most teachers avoided it, but Janice had claimed it. The door didn't lock, which was fine. She didn't need privacy, just space. She'd pull out her laptop, a 6-year-old Dell missing the key, and log into her coursework. She was 6 credits away from completing a degree in educational leadership through an accelerated adult program offered by the same university that operated Larchmont Hills Academy. A quiet little clause buried deep in the staff handbook granted full scholarships to employees who worked at least 30 hours a week. Most never noticed it. Janice did. It wasn't about ambition anymore. It was about finishing something that had been interrupted years ago, back when she had a child, a husband, a stable job in Maryland, and then lost all 3 in the space of 18 months. Life has a way of knocking the wind out of you before you realize you've been holding your breath. But she never complained, not to anyone. That wasn't how she was raised. Sometimes late at night she'd get a text from her sister in Detroit. "You sleeping or still playing superhero?" Janice would reply with a photo of her textbook and a line, "Chapter 6 is kicking my behind." Her sister always sent a laughing emoji followed by, "You're still the smartest person I know. Don't let those stuck-up girls get to you." She never told her sister just how bad it had gotten. She didn't mention the time Camille accidentally knocked over the bucket of dirty water and smirked as Janice knelt to clean it, or the time Olivia whispered to a group of parents on tour that the school loved to hire charity cases. Still, Janice kept showing up, always 5 minutes early, always with her cart clean, her uniform pressed. She was patient, but she wasn't naive. She understood the school's culture better than the girls ever could. Behind the polished wood panels and curated diversity brochures, there was rot. Not everyone, of course, but enough to stain the air. Janice didn't need to fix it. She just needed to watch, listen, and report. Because what the students didn't know, what not even the staff knew, was that Janice had been recruited for more than just mopping floors. 2 years ago, after an internal report surfaced accusing the academy of ignoring racial and economic discrimination, the board of trustees agreed to a radical idea. Plant someone inside, quietly. Someone who wouldn't raise suspicions. Someone who could see everything. Janice had been working part-time at a community college in Oakland when she got the call. They offered her a job. No title, no special treatment, just an ID badge, a mop, and a mission. To observe, to take notes, to document the patterns of behavior that couldn't be captured in policy memos or camera footage. It wasn't glamorous, but it mattered. And in the dead of night, with her coursework open in one window and her field notes in another, Janice wrote everything. Not just the cruelty, the indifference, the smiles that disappeared the second someone turned their back. She wrote about the good teachers too, the few students who looked her in the eye, the way Mr. Del Toro left that copy of Beloved with a sticky note that said, "For someone who understands silence." Still, every shift drained her, not from the work but from the weight of pretending. She carried their ignorance like a second uniform, and every day it grew heavier. But something was coming that would lift it all, just not in the way they expected. By early spring, the students at Larchmont Hills Academy were already half checked out. Senioritis had crept in like fog, slow, thick, and smug. Olivia and Camille spent most of their days in the senior lounge, thumbing through college acceptance emails and launching verbal darts at anyone they felt beneath them. But it wasn't enough anymore to make jokes in passing. The thrill had worn off. They wanted a reaction. One Monday morning, Camille marched into the admin office and faked concern. "I think the janitor's been stealing test copies," she whispered to the front desk clerk, lowering her voice dramatically. "I saw her in a classroom late at night, alone." Miss Robbins blinked. "Janice? Are you sure?" Camille put on her best wounded angel face. "I mean, I don't want to get anyone in trouble, but this school is supposed to be secure, right?" It was a calculated move. If anything came of it, great. If not, the seed of doubt had been planted. That afternoon, Janice was called into the operations office. No accusation, just routine questions. She sat calmly as the facilities manager glanced at his clipboard, clearly uncomfortable. "We just wanted to ask if you've been spending time in unused classrooms during your shift." "I clean every classroom I'm assigned," Janice answered plainly. "Yes, but do you stay longer for any reason?" She held his gaze. "I finish my work. Sometimes I take a break. Same as anyone else." He nodded and scribbled something. "Okay, that's all." Janice stood up. "If there's a concern about my performance, I'd appreciate a direct conversation." The man's ears turned pink. "No concern, just, protocol." It was a weak lie and they both knew it. Outside the office, Janice found Camille leaning against the wall, pretending to scroll her phone. The smile she gave wasn't friendly. "Everything all right, Miss Albany?" she asked, voice sugary. Janice didn't blink. "Better than you'd think." Camille's expression wavered for half a second before snapping back into its usual smirk. But this wasn't just a game anymore. Camille and Olivia had grown up watching people get away with things that made them bold and reckless. 2 days later, Olivia orchestrated another stunt. She dropped a silver necklace on the floor near the janitor's closet, then loudly discovered it missing from her locker during lunch. A small crowd gathered. She held up her wrist dramatically. "I swear I left it in there this morning. I guess it could be gone forever." Camille chimed in, "Maybe check the mop bucket?" Their friends laughed, some too nervous not to. But when one of the admin staff overheard the comment and offered to look into it, Olivia suddenly backpedaled. "Oh no, I'm sure I just misplaced it. Not a big deal." The moment passed, but the damage lingered. That evening, Mr. Del Toro walked past Janice in the hallway. He stopped. "You doing okay?" Janice looked up from her cart. "You've been here long enough to know the games these kids play." He sighed. "Too long sometimes." There was a pause. "Is there anything I can do?" She thought for a moment. "Keep doing what you're doing. That's rare enough." What neither of them knew, what no one knew, was that Janice had already sent her first internal report to the board. Documented dates, quotes, behavior patterns, names redacted for now. But she wasn't the only one watching anymore. An independent firm had begun their quiet audits. Interviews, surveys disguised as student engagement questionnaires. Camille and Olivia thought they ruled the school, but eyes were turning. Whispers shifted direction. Still the girls carried on. Cruelty had become a habit, and habits are hard to break when they've never come with consequences. And then one Friday, Janice overheard something that made her stop in her tracks. In the lounge, behind a cracked door, Camille was bragging to a boy from the tennis team. "You know that janitor chick? My mom says people like her are just here to make the place look diverse." She called it, what's the word? Optics. The boy laughed. Olivia added, "My dad said the school's bleeding money giving those scholarship perks to staff. It's basically charity." Camille snorted. "Can't fix broke, not with books." Janice stood quietly, one foot still in the hallway, one hand gripping the edge of her cart. She said nothing, but something in her shifted. She had been patient long enough. But now she had everything she needed. And it was almost time to show them. Before she was sweeping floors under fluorescent lights, Janice Albany had been someone else entirely. 12 years ago she was Janice Simmons, a director of curriculum development for a public school district in Maryland. She had a corner office, 3 staff members under her, and a plaque on her wall from the state superintendent. Married, a mother. Life back then had structure and warmth. Then came the accident. Her husband's car was struck by a delivery truck on I-83 during a snowstorm. He didn't make it. Her daughter, Kira, 6 years old, survived barely. 2 months in a hospital bed, followed by a year of surgeries and rehab. Insurance covered most of it, but not everything. Janice used her savings, her retirement, and eventually she sold their home. Then Kira caught pneumonia. After everything, that was what took her. Janice quit her job 2 weeks after the funeral. She couldn't look at a school without seeing Kira's empty chair, couldn't bear the sound of children laughing in hallways without remembering hers would never come back. She drifted, worked odd jobs, lived on couches and rented rooms. Finally, in a small studio apartment in Antioch, California. She never stopped reading though. Never stopped learning. That's how she found the program, an obscure educational equity initiative offered through a university partnership. A new start. And when they asked if she'd be willing to go undercover to investigate behavioral discrepancies among privileged students and faculty attitudes, she didn't hesitate. Not because she needed the money, but because the system had failed too many people who looked like her and she wasn't going to let it slide anymore. She applied for the janitorial job under her maiden name, passed the background checks, kept her degree and credentials tucked away in a folder at home. At first she just wanted to blend in, watch, listen. She had no intention of getting involved. But the things she saw, a senior teacher mocking a student with a speech impediment when she thought no one was listening, a girl's financial aid status being discussed at a staff meeting like it was a character flaw, and of course Camille and Olivia, whose parents had given donations large enough to name the gymnasium after a hedge fund. Their confidence wasn't arrogance, it was inherited immunity. Janice wasn't shocked, but she was disappointed. The school's founder, Eleanor Larchmont, had envisioned the academy as a place for future leaders of every background. That vision had faded under layers of money, marketing, and legacy admissions. So Janice got to work. Her notebook filled quickly. Specific dates, recurring language patterns, staff responses or lack thereof. She attended faculty meetings when invited, always sitting in the back. She asked questions that made people shift in their seats. She volunteered for committees no one wanted to join. Quietly, methodically, she became the eyes and ears the board had needed. And in the evenings when the halls emptied, she studied. She wasn't just observing, she was rebuilding herself. Each completed module brought her closer to that second degree. Each essay submitted felt like reclaiming a piece of the woman she used to be. One night, while reviewing a case study on institutional gatekeeping, she came across a sentence that stuck with her. True authority doesn't announce itself. It waits to be noticed. She underlined it twice. It was almost time. Graduation was 3 weeks away. She had completed the program quietly. Her GPA placed her at the top of her cohort. The board had already cleared her to speak. Camille and Olivia were still strutting through the halls like they owned the place, but they had no idea what was coming. And the faculty? They were about to be reminded that not every lesson comes from a classroom. Janice had spent 2 years walking behind them, but now she was about to take the stage front and center, and they wouldn't see it coming. The sky over Antioch was clear that morning, too bright for the tension some people carried with them into the Larchmont Hills Academy auditorium. Families filled the seats, proud parents buzzing with anticipation, phones in hand, flowers, ties, expensive perfume. Everything looked perfect. Camille Strathmore wore a champagne-colored stole her mother had flown in from France. Olivia Cranston had her hair professionally done before sunrise, her makeup set to last all day. They smiled for selfies, laughed like royalty, and stood with the poise of girls who'd been taught from birth that the world was theirs to inherit. Backstage, Janice stood quietly in her black robe. No cords, no extra flair. She'd turned down the academic medal the committee offered her. Said she didn't need it. What she needed was one moment. Just one. And it was finally here. The dean, Dr. Leonard, approached her with a program in hand. "Ready, Miss Albany?" She looked him in the eye. "I've been ready." He gave a tight smile and walked back toward the podium. Camille and Olivia didn't even glance at her as they passed by in their tailored gowns. Why would they? She was invisible again, just part of the furniture. The ceremony began like every other. Names were called, families clapped, speeches were given. The school's jazz trio played something soft and forgettable. Then Dr. Leonard stepped up to the microphone. "Before we conclude this year's commencement, we have a very special recognition. One that, by design, has been kept confidential until now." Students shifted in their chairs. Parents leaned forward. Even the faculty looked confused. This year, the Board of Trustees approved a confidential academic pilot program designed to allow working staff at our institution to pursue higher education under complete anonymity. The program requires both academic excellence and professional integrity of the highest order. Camille looked at Olivia. Olivia frowned. Whispers rose behind them. Dr. Leonard continued. "We are proud to announce that the highest academic honor this year belongs not to a student you may have studied beside, but to someone many of you passed by without a second thought." He paused, then said clearly, "Please welcome Janice Albany, this year's valedictorian." Silence. Then, like a glass dropped in a quiet room, the shock broke. Heads turned. Mouths opened. Camille froze, her face stiff. Olivia blinked hard, then laughed until she realized no one else was laughing. Janice walked calmly to the stage. Her steps were measured, her back straight. She didn't look at anyone in the crowd until she reached the podium. Then she scanned the audience slowly, until her eyes settled right on Camille and Olivia. Then she spoke. "I came to this school with a mop in one hand and a question in the back of my mind." Her voice was strong, clear, without hesitation. "I wondered what kind of place this really was, beyond the rankings, the brochures, the speeches. I wanted to know if respect was something you could find here, or if it had to be earned only by those wearing the right clothes, the right shoes, carrying the right last names." The auditorium was dead silent. "I worked long nights, cleaned up after the same people who whispered behind my back. And when they saw me reading a book or sitting in a classroom after hours, they laughed." She paused. "But I wasn't just reading. I was watching. I was studying. Not just for a degree but for answers." She turned slightly toward the faculty. "And now I have them." Students looked around, shifting in their seats. Olivia's face was unreadable. Camille gripped her program tightly, her knuckles pale. Janice raised her chin. "I stand here today not just as your valedictorian, but as a reflection of the very thing this school claims to stand for: growth, opportunity, and truth." But she hadn't revealed everything yet. And what she said next would change the room forever. You could hear a cough from 3 rows back, a chair creaked, a phone buzzed quietly against someone's hip, but no one moved to check it. Everyone was waiting, leaning forward, bracing themselves for what Janice might say next. She didn't rush. She took a sip of water, glanced down at her notes and folded them carefully. Then she looked back up. "I'm sure some of you are wondering how I ended up here," she said, wearing this robe, standing at this podium. A few people in the front row, faculty mostly, nodded without realizing they had. "I wasn't just here to earn a degree," she continued. 2 years ago I was approached by the university board after complaints were raised, quietly, privately, about the growing culture of class division and entitlement within this academy. They asked me to apply for a job, but not as a teacher, not as a consultant. As a janitor. Now the room stirred. Janice let the silence breathe. My role was to observe. Not in a corner office, not in a meeting room. But in the hallways, the locker rooms, the late-night classrooms where students speak freely because they think no one's listening. I was listening. A woman in the audience, one of the parents, shifted uncomfortably. Over time I witnessed small things, but small things add up. The way certain students treated others who they believed didn't belong. The way silence from adults allowed that behavior to grow. And how some of you who should have known better looked the other way. She looked toward the staff. Some of you knew and you did nothing. The words landed like a slap. Camille's mouth had gone dry. Olivia had stopped breathing through her nose, just sat there, still, like blinking might make her disappear. The worst part, Janice continued, is that the behavior wasn't hidden. It was public. Casual. Normalized. And most of the time it was rewarded, with laughter, with attention, with popularity. She took a breath. "I'm not here to shame you. I'm here to remind you." Her voice softened slightly. "You don't get to decide someone's value by what they wear or what they do for a living. You don't get to measure dignity by dollar signs or family names." She looked down for just a second, then back up with new clarity. "I once had a daughter. Her name was Kira. She would have been your age now." A hush swept through the crowd like a cold wind. "She died before she got a chance to wear a cap and gown." I'm not sharing that for sympathy. I'm sharing it because I see her in all of you. I see who she could have become. And I wonder if she had been here, would she have been mocked too? No one dared answer. Maybe. Maybe not. But what I know for sure is that if you leave here today thinking the world will bow to your name, you've already failed. She took another pause. Education is not just about books and tests. It's about how you treat the person you think you'll never need, because life has a funny way of turning. And then came the last blow. I've submitted my final report to the board. Based on my findings, the scholarship program is being restructured to prioritize integrity and contribution, not legacy. There will be a full audit of disciplinary cases over the past 5 years. And students who have participated in harassment, yes, including verbal and social, will face formal reviews. Gasps. A low rumble in the back. A few parents whispering, not so discreetly anymore. Janice stepped back slightly. This isn't revenge. This is accountability. She held the gaze of Camille, then Olivia, who had dropped her eyes to the floor. And accountability doesn't care how rich your father is. But even that wasn't the end, because consequences would come long after the applause stopped. The ceremony ended with only half the energy it began with. Some students clapped, others didn't know what to do. A few families, clearly uncomfortable, slipped out early. But Janice remained composed, smiling as she returned to her seat, not the back row where she once watched from the shadows, but up front, beside board members and professors who now looked at her with something new in their eyes: respect. Camille didn't speak as she exited the auditorium. Her father was already waiting near the car, tight-lipped, barely meeting her eyes. Olivia's mother, arms crossed, stood by the valet in stunned silence. There were no congratulations, no flowers, just silence. Inside, a small crowd had formed around Janice. Teachers who had never said more than a polite hello were now shaking her hand. Mr. Del Toro stood at a respectful distance, waiting for the right moment. "You didn't just speak," he said when they finally talked. "You changed the entire atmosphere." Janice looked at him and smiled softly. The air needed changing. Outside on the lawn, some of the younger students buzzed with admiration. One girl in a red dress whispered to her friend, "I didn't even know she was in school." Her friend replied, "I didn't even know she could speak like that." People were starting to realize what they had overlooked, what they had chosen not to see. Later that evening, Janice sat in her apartment with a plastic container of leftover chicken salad and the commencement program folded on the table beside her. Her phone buzzed. It was an email from the board's director. Subject: Thank you. Message: Your final report is being reviewed. Policy meetings begin next week. Your courage will shape the future of this school. She set the phone down and exhaled. Not relief, not pride, just a quiet, grounded sense of purpose. The kind that didn't need clapping or awards. Meanwhile, word about the graduation speech traveled fast. An online clip posted by a teacher's assistant was already circulating among parents and alumni. The title was simple: Janitor or Genius. Larchmont's graduation shocker. And as for Camille and Olivia? Camille was summoned for a disciplinary review. Her parents had little choice but to comply. Her planned summer internship at her father's firm was quietly withdrawn. The rumor was that she'd be asked to complete community service hours before receiving her diploma officially. Olivia's parents pushed back, threatened legal action, demanded apologies. But when the school released excerpts from Janice's documentation, including witness testimonies and pattern logs, they backed off. Olivia was allowed to graduate, but stripped of her honors distinctions. Neither girl spoke publicly about it, but those who knew them said something had shifted. The jokes stopped. The whispers too. The next fall, Janice was offered a new position: Director of Equity and Inclusion Initiatives for the school's entire district. She accepted. On her last day walking the halls with her cart, she left a sticky note on the supply closet door. Respect isn't owed, it's revealed. Clean floors, clear eyes. J. And just like that, she left the mop behind. She walked out of Larchmont Hills in a navy blazer with a satchel over her shoulder, not because she needed to prove she'd risen above her job, but because she no longer needed to stay hidden. A week later she returned, not in uniform, but as a guest speaker for the new staff orientation. She stood at the podium once again, this time addressing teachers, new hires and assistants. Your job title doesn't determine your influence, she said. How you treat people when no one's looking does. Her voice again reached the back of the room, and this time, everyone was listening. Because they finally understood. Respect isn't about how loud you are. It's about how deeply you're heard. If this story moved you, if it made you think twice about the way we treat people we think we'll never need, subscribe to the channel, share this story, talk about it. We need more voices like Janice's in the world, and sometimes we need reminders that the quietest person in the room might be the one who teaches us the biggest lesson.